So this is from a book on trauma stewardship and talking about our 5 directions. When we are in the thick of our work, our day-to-day, it can be really hard to zoom out and kind of get the bigger picture, to center ourselves in what we're doing and why. And so I just want to give people a few moments to consider for themselves, for yourselves, what brought you here today, what investment you have in your daily practice, and just kind of taking a moment to reflect on some of these factors. And I'll read through them as you consider. So our north direction is water, creating that space for inquiry. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why does this matter to me? Why do I keep showing up? Is trauma mastery a factor for me? Is this something that I really want to be focused on? And is this working for me? Fire is choosing our focus. Where am I putting my focus? What's my plan B? If I decide that this isn't something I want to do anymore, where do I go next, right? Sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves too, is that it's not always just gritting through the hard times. Sometimes it's like, maybe we do need to make a change. Maybe this isn't working anymore. Earth is creating a microculture, practicing compassion for yourself and for others, thinking about what you can do for large-scale systemic change. How do you feel like you're contributing to a bigger mission, whether it's, within your small community or a larger scale? And then air is finding that balance, engaging with our lives outside of work, moving energy through, not letting that stagnate, those emotions be held in our body, finding a way to release the energy from the work that we're doing, and even maybe considering a gratitude practice. So we've talked about kind of the bigger implications of what trauma is and what trauma exposure looks like. We can also think about how we understand the buckets of trauma's impact. So we know that trauma exposure can have a cognitive impact, like I mentioned, what we think about ourselves, other people, the world, what we do, how we engage with ourselves in the world. Emotional, how we feel, how we regulate our emotions, what emotions we experience or don't experience. And physical, what I sense, physiological changes that can result from trauma. So when we're thinking about an example and thinking about experiencing trauma and how these different impacts can come up, so we can think about cognitive, the way it impacts our beliefs and how we think. People are unsafe. I'm unworthy. The world is a dangerous place. This and so many other types of beliefs that can come up. It impacts what we do, right? So if we have this belief that people are unsafe, that you're unworthy, the world is dangerous, you might withdraw or isolate. You might engage in risky behavior, have a disregard of life. It doesn't matter anyway. Things aren't going to change. No one cares about me. We might seek to control others or the circumstances around us because we feel like if we could just grasp onto control, then maybe the world would be less dangerous, less unpredictable. That has emotional implications. We can experience fear, sadness, anger, disgust as a result of these things. And these are not obviously one-to-one, and we can have emotions that impact our behavior and how we think, and these are all moving together in a cyclical fashion. All of these things have physical implications, right? If we're thinking about that fight or flight response, our sympathetic nervous system being impacted by, if holding the thought, this is dangerous, I feel unsafe, you're going to have a physiological reaction to that. Increased heart rate, difficulty breathing, muscle tension, difficulty sleeping. And you can see how when these things go from acute responses in the moment to a chronic experience, how it can start to wear down the body and have these implications in terms of development of chronic illness and other health concerns, just the body being worn down by stress. So I'm not going to go through every little detail of this, but I wanted to kind of think about this in the big picture, right? Of when we think about the impact of childhood trauma, there's a multitude of impacts that somebody can have. Like we talked about cognitive, physical health, emotional health, relationships, mental health, behavior, brain development, that somebody is walking through their, experiences and into their adulthood. And so I kind of think about it as I love old houses. I live in an old house myself, and I love the quirks and all the things that come with living in an old house. So I kind of think about it as, when somebody has experienced early childhood trauma, maybe even pre-verbally, they maybe even in utero were exposed to chronic stress. When we think about the house that is built, that person's emotional house, and thinking about a staircase where there might be stairs that are completely missing. There might be creaks. There may be boards that are broken. There might be a nail that's sticking out. There might be, things that are impacting the staircase that can be really challenging. And so living in this old house, you kind of learn to live with the quirks of the place, right? You kind of know that, you got to miss the third step, because if you step on that, then it will fall through, or you'll hit that nail. So we kind of learn to navigate whatever setting experiences that we've been offered, right? But then maybe there's a day where you're sick, you're distracted, you're overwhelmed, and you aren't thinking about it. And you're not thinking about how that third step is creaky, and you're usually able to step over it. But this time you just are so taxed, and you make the mistake, you step on that board and it smacks you in the face. You're angry and you're frustrated, and you act out and you have a reaction to it. And everyone around is like, what's happening? What happened? What occurred, right? But when we understand the ways in which we are navigating our internal world and the world around us, the impact of trauma can be significant. And what can happen is, when we are on the outside and we're not having the awareness of how this is part of the picture, we can start to draw different conclusions about why someone is behaving the way that they are. And that can lead to take us down a path of different reactions to that person. Now, this is not to say that people shouldn't be held responsible for their behaviors and actions, but it does give us a different avenue, right? If we are able to understand that our ability to regulate our emotions, the way in which our staircase is built, the way that our old house is built, and its foundation, and its an electrical system, and it's, all of these things are different for each of us. And that when we're asked to do the same tasks, that there's going to be different burdens and pros and cons within each of these structures. It might give us a new avenue to set up somebody for success, rather than pushing them through some arbitrary expectations that we know are going to be more challenging for them. And yet, as we've talked about, we know that people can demonstrate resilience and growth and change, and that we should help to be promoting that. We can help to fill in those steps in the staircase. But that when we're understanding the true impact of some of the experiences that people have been through, is the daily tax of that. Think about the day where you didn't have enough sick days and you had to go in and you felt bad and it was so hard to get through the day. And imagine how you felt in that moment, and the impact of navigating these significant trauma reactions, and how that's going to impact your ability to engage in the world, engage with our complex systems. These reactions can also look really similar when it comes to workplace trauma. It impacts how we think, what we do, how we feel, what we sense in our body. Some of the thoughts that can come up are things like, nothing I do matters. The client doesn't want to get better. People are awful. The world is broken. We might check out during sessions. It doesn't matter anyway. Avoid discussion of trauma. I can't go there. I can't tolerate them talking about this. We might be quick to judgment if we're holding the belief implicitly or explicitly, people are awful. We might be quick to make judgments or assumptions about their behavior and why they do the things that they do. We might numb out. We might just try and not feel any of it. Emotionally, we can become hopeless, helpless. We might experience apathy, irritability. We might dread going into work, doing the work that we need to do. We can feel exhausted. We can feel it in our bellies, that GI distress. We can be restless, have sleep disturbance. And as you can imagine, just like for other types of trauma exposure, it can have chronic implications for our health. And so, as I said, emotional regulation is a privilege that's not granted to all. We don't all come at the same set point in terms of our ability to manage stress and uncertainty. And part of that is because trauma greatly impacts our ability to feel safe in our bodies. Our threat perception is changing as a result of trauma, and our ability to regulate our emotions is significantly impacted. So you can think about the implications of how early on those more sensitive threat perception, the lack of safety in the body, and the ability to regulate has implications as the earlier that occurs in somebody's life and the more reinforced it is throughout their lifetime.